My hands were shaking as I stared at the positive pregnancy test in the bathroom of our luxury penthouse. The 2 pink lines felt like they were burning into my retinas, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I was pregnant with Adrian Castellano's child, the most powerful alpha in the entire city, the man who owned half the commercial real estate in the country, and the person who had explicitly told me 6 months ago that he never wanted children. I heard the front door open, and his familiar footsteps echoed through the marble hallway. My heart was racing so fast, I thought it might burst right out of my chest. I quickly wrapped the test in tissue paper and shoved it deep into my pocket before stepping out of the bathroom. Adrian was standing in the living room, loosening his tie with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other. He looked as devastatingly handsome as always, sharp jawline catching the golden afternoon light streaming through the floor to ceiling windows, his dark hair perfectly styled, despite the long day he must have had at the office. When he finally looked up and saw me, his expression softened slightly. "Kai," he said, his deep voice sending familiar shivers down my spine. "You're home early." I forced a smile and walked toward him, trying desperately to act normal, even though my entire world had just shifted on its axis. The cafe wasn't busy today, so my manager let me leave. He nodded absently, already looking back down at his phone. That had become normal lately. Adrian was always busy, always distracted, always somewhere else, even when he was standing right in front of me. We had met 2 years ago when I was working at an upscale coffee shop near his office building. He used to come in every morning at exactly 7:30, always ordering the same thing, double espresso with no sugar. I was the one who always made his coffee, and after 3 months of polite exchanges, he finally asked for my number. I never imagined someone like him would be interested in someone like me. I was just a university dropout from the poor side of town, an Omega with no family and no prospects, working minimum wage just to afford my tiny studio apartment. But Adrian didn't care about any of that. He pursued me with the same intensity he brought to his business deals. Fent. And within 6 months I had moved into his penthouse. For a while, everything felt like a dream. He took me to expensive restaurants, bought me clothes I could never afford, and held me at night like I was the most precious thing in his world. But slowly, things started to change. He became busier, more distant, more focused on expanding his empire. Our conversations became shorter, his touches became fewer, and the warm look in his eyes started fading into something that felt dangerously close to indifference. Now, standing in our shared living room with his baby growing inside me, I realized I had no idea how to tell him. That night, I barely slept. I lay beside Adrian in our king-sized bed, listening to his steady breathing, while my mind raced through 1,000 different scenarios. What if he got angry? What if he accused me of trying to trap him? What if he told me to get rid of it? The thought made my stomach twist painfully. The next morning, I decided I needed to tell him. Couldn't keep this secret any longer. I found him in his home office, already dressed in one of his expensive tailored suits, typing furiously on his laptop. I knocked softly on the doorframe, and he glanced up briefly before returning his attention to the screen. "Adrian," I said quietly, stepping into the room. "I need to talk to you about something important." He didn't look up this time. "Can it wait? I have a board meeting in an hour, and I still need to review these reports." My throat felt tight. "It's really important," he sighed, the kind of exasperated sound that made me feel like I was being a burden. But he finally closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. "All right. What is it?" I stood there for a moment, my fingers twisting nervously together, trying to find the right words. But there was no right way to say it, so I just said it. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian's expression didn't change at first. He just stared at me, his dark eyes completely unreadable. Then slowly, very slowly, his jaw tightened. "You're what?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "I found out yesterday." He stood up, abruptly. The chair cloud lay against the hardwood floor. "How did this happen?" The question felt like a slap. "How did it happen?" I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "Adrian, we've been living together for 2 years. How do you think it happened?" His hand came up to rub his temples, and I could see the frustration written clearly across his face. "I thought you were on suppressants." "I was," I said defensively, "but nothing is 100% effective. You know that." He turned away from me, walking toward the large window that overlooked the city skyline. For a long moment, he just stood there, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders tense. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. "I can't do this right now, Kai. My heart's." "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said," he replied without turning around. "I have too much going on. The company is in the middle of a major acquisition. I'm negotiating deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't have time for this." Tears were already burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "This isn't something you can just schedule for a more convenient time, Adrian. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." He finally turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made my blood run cold. "I never wanted children, Kai. I made that very clear from the beginning." "I know," I whispered, "but it happened anyway." "Fix it," he said bluntly. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Fix it?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You want me to get rid of our baby? I want you to make a decision that makes sense for both of us," he said, his tone becoming clinical, detached. "You're 23 years old. You work part-time at a coffee shop. You have no degree, no career, no family support system. How exactly do you plan on raising a child?" Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. "I thought we would raise it together," I said quietly. Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Together? Kai, I'm running a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't have time to change diapers and attend parent-teacher meetings." "Then what do you have time for?" I asked, my voice breaking. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his briefcase from the desk and walked past me toward the door. "I need to go," he said coldly. "We'll talk about this later." But we didn't talk about it later. In fact, Adrian barely spoke to me at all over the next 2 weeks. He left early every morning and came home late every night, and whenever I tried to bring up the pregnancy, he would find an excuse to leave the room. I felt like I was living with a stranger. Then one evening, everything fell apart. I came home from work to find Adrian sitting in the living room with another Omega. She was beautiful, the kind of Omega who looked like she belonged on magazine covers, with long silky hair, perfect skin, and an elegant dress that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. They were sitting close together on the couch, and Adrian was smiling at her in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. When he noticed me standing in the doorway, the smile disappeared. "Kai," he said, standing up quickly. "This is Vanessa. She's the daughter of one of our business partners." Vanessa looked at me with barely concealed disdain, her eyes sweeping over my cheap work uniform and worn-out shoes. "So you're the Omega Adrian mentioned," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "What's going on, Adrian?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable, but only for a moment. "Vanessa and I were just discussing a potential partnership between our families." "A partnership," I repeated flatly. Vanessa stood up gracefully and walked over to Adrian, placing her perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "Actually," she said, smiling up at him, "it's a bit more than that." My stomach dropped as Vanessa's words hung in the air between us. Adrian shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't pull away from her touch. And that small detail told me everything I needed to know. What does she mean, Adrian? I asked, even though part of me already knew the answer. He cleared his throat and loosened his tie, a nervous habit I had noticed over the years. My father has been putting pressure on me to settle down with someone from our social circle. Someone who can help strengthen the company's position. The words felt like they were coming from very far away. You told me you didn't care about social circles. You said status didn't matter to you. Vanessa laughed softly, the sound like breaking glass. Oh, sweetheart, she said in that same sickeningly sweet voice. Men like Adrian always care about status.
You were just a temporary distraction.
I wanted to scream at her, to tell her. She had no right to speak to me that way in what was supposed to be my home, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I looked at Adrian, waiting for him to defend me, to tell her she was wrong. But he said nothing. Adrian, I whispered, my voice shaking. Tell me this isn't what I think it is. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke something inside me. Guilt, resignation, but not love, not anymore. Kai, you have to understand, he started, his voice carefully controlled. This isn't personal. It's business. My family has certain expectations, and Vanessa comes from the kind of background that makes sense for someone in my position. Makes sense? I repeated incredulously. We've been together for 2 years. I live here. I'm carrying your child. And you're telling me that some business arrangement makes more sense than our relationship. Vanessa's smile widened, and I realized with horror that she was enjoying this. He didn't tell you? She asked, feigning surprise. Adrian and I have been seeing each other for the past 3 months. Our families have already started planning the engagement party. The room started spinning. 3 months. He had been cheating on me for 3 months. All those late nights at the office, all those business trips, all those times he was too tired to even look at me. He had been with her. Get out, Adrian said suddenly. But he wasn't talking to Vanessa. He was talking to me, stared at him in disbelief. What? I said, get out, he repeated, his voice growing harder. This is my apartment. I've supported you for 2 years. I think I've been generous enough. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and bitter. I'm pregnant with your baby, Adrian. You're just going to throw me out? He walked over to a side table and pulled out a checkbook. I watched in numb horror as he wrote something down, tore off the check, and held it out to me. This should be more than enough to take care of the situation, he said coldly. Consider it severance pay. I looked down at the check. $50,000. He was trying to pay me to disappear, to get rid of his child, to erase 2 years of my life like I was nothing more than a failed business transaction. Something inside me snapped. I tore the check in half and let the pieces fall to the floor. I don't want your money, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, and I'm keeping this baby. Adrian's expression darkened. Then you're on your own. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. I turned and walked toward the bedroom we had shared, Vanessa's triumphant laughter following me down the hall. I grabbed my old backpack from the closet and started shoving clothes into it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip anything. Everything in this apartment belonged to Adrian. The expensive dresses he had bought me, the jewelry, the designer shoes. None of it was really mine. I left all of it behind and took only the things I had brought with me 2 years ago. A few worn t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, some underwear, and a photograph of my parents that I kept hidden in the nightstand drawer. When I walked back through the living room, Adrian was on his phone and Vanessa was reapplying her lipstick in a compact mirror. Neither of them looked at me as I headed for the door. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Some foolish part of me, still hoping he would stop me, that he would realize what he was doing and take it all back, but he didn't. So I opened the door and stepped out of Adrian Castellano's life. The elevator ride down from the penthouse felt like descending into hell. By the time I reached the street level, I was sobbing so hard I could barely see. The doorman who had always greeted me warmly for the past 2 years looked away uncomfortably as I stumbled past him into the cold night air. I had nowhere to go. My old apartment had been rented to someone else within a week of me moving in with Adrian. I had no family, no close friends because I had been so wrapped up in my relationship that I had let all my other connections fade away. I was completely alone. I walked for hours through the dark city streets, my backpack getting heavier with every step until I finally found myself in front of a homeless shelter. The building was old and run down, with peeling paint and barred windows. Nothing like the luxury I had gotten used to. But I had no other choice. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh and the air smelled like disinfectant and unwashed bodies. A tired-looking woman behind a desk asked for my information and handed me a thin blanket and a pillow. "Bunks are upstairs," she said without looking up. "Breakfast is at 6. Don't be late or you won't eat." That night I lay on a narrow bunk bed in a room filled with 30 other people, listening to snoring and crying and angry muttered conversations. My hand rested on my still flat stomach and I whispered promises to the tiny life growing inside me. "I'm going to take care of you," I said softly. "I don't know how yet, but I will. I promise." The next morning, I went back to my job at the coffee shop. My manager took one look at my swollen eyes and the backpack I was carrying and didn't ask questions. She just put me on the schedule for as many shifts as I could handle. I worked every single day, sometimes pulling double shifts, saving every penny I could. At night, I went back to the shelter. Some of the other residents were kind, sharing food or advice. Others were hostile, seeing me as competition for limited resources. I learned quickly to keep my head down and avoid trouble. Weeks passed, stomachs started to swell, and I had to buy loose shirts from thrift stores to hide it. Morning sickness hit me hard, but I couldn't afford to miss work. So, I spent my breaks vomiting in the staff bathroom and then going right back to making lattice. One evening, about 2 months after Adrian had thrown me out, I was walking back to the shelter when I saw his face on a massive billboard. He was in a tuxedo, looking impossibly handsome, with Vanessa by his side in a wedding dress. "Castellano, Whitmore Wedding of the Year," the text proclaimed. He had married her. The baby I was carrying would be born fatherless because Adrian had chosen status over family. I stood there staring at that billboard until my vision blurred with tears, and then I forced myself to keep walking, because standing still meant drowning. Time moved differently when every day was about survival. Suddenly, I was 5 months pregnant, then 6, then 7. My belly was huge now, impossible to hide, and my manager finally sat me down for a difficult conversation. "Kai," she said gently, "I'm so sorry, but I can't keep you on the schedule much longer. The customers are starting to complain. Corporate has policies about this kind of thing." I knew she meant well, but the words still felt like a death sentence. "Please," I begged. "I only need to work for 2 more months, just until the baby comes. I'll do anything. I'll work in the back where customers can't see me." She looked genuinely pained. "I wish I could, sweetie. I really do. But my hands are tied. I lost my job the next day. Without income, I couldn't save anymore. The little money I had managed to put away was disappearing fast, spent on prenatal vitamins and doctor visits at the free clinic. I was 8 months pregnant, homeless, jobless, and terrified. Then one night at the shelter, a fight broke out between 2 residents. Someone threw a chair, and it hit me in the side. The pain was immediate and sharp, radiating from my belly through my entire body. I screamed and doubled over, feeling warm liquid running down my legs. "The baby!" I gasped. "Something's wrong with the baby." Someone called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. The doctors examined me frantically while I lay on the gurney, crying and begging them to save my child. "The baby is in distress," one of them said. "We need to do an emergency C-section." Everything happened so fast after that. Bright lights, the smell of antiseptic, people in masks hovering over me. I felt a sharp pinch as they inserted the IV, and then everything started to fade. The last thing I remember, thinking before the anesthesia took me under, was a prayer that my baby would survive, even if I didn't. I woke up in a hospital bed with sunlight streaming through the window and an oxygen tube in my nose. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened. Then the memories came flooding back, and I tried to sit up, panic seizing my chest. "My baby," I said, my voice hoarse and desperate. "Where's my baby?" A nurse appeared beside my bed immediately, pressing me gently back down. "You need to stay calm," she said in a soothing voice. "You just had major surgery." "My baby," I repeated, tears already streaming down my face. "Please, I need to know if my baby is okay." The nurse's expression softened. "Your son is fine. He's in the NICU because he was born premature, but he's stable and healthy. You can see him soon." A son. I had a son. The relief was so overwhelming that I started sobbing, and the nurse handed me tissues while making sympathetic sounds. Over the next few days, I learned what had happened. Chair that hit me had triggered early labor at 34 weeks. The emergency C-section had saved both our lives, but my baby, my son, needed to stay in the NICU for at least 2 weeks to make sure his lungs were fully developed. When they finally wheeled me down to see him, I wasn't prepared for the surge of love that hit me the moment I looked into the incubator. He was so tiny, barely 5 pounds, with tubes and wires attached to his little body. But he was perfect. He had a small nose, delicate fingers that curled into fists, and when he opened his eyes, they were the same dark color as Adrian's. I reached through the opening in the incubator and gently touched his hand. His tiny fingers immediately wrapped around my thumb, and I felt my heart break and heal at the same time. "Hi, baby," I whispered. "I'm your papa. I'm so sorry you had to come into the world this way, but I promise I'm going to give you the best life I can." A social worker visited me the next day. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipboard full of questions. "Kai," she said gently, "I need to talk to you about your situation. The hospital has informed me that you're currently homeless. Is that correct?" I nodded, shame burning through me. "The shelter I was staying at won't take me back with a baby. They said they don't have the facilities." She wrote something down. "What about the baby's father? Is he in the picture?" I laughed bitterly. "No, he made it very clear he wants nothing to do with us." More notes on the clipboard. "Do you have any family or friends who can help you?" "No," I whispered. "I'm completely alone." Social worker's expression was sympathetic but professional. "Kai, I'm going to be honest with you. Without stable housing and income, the state may decide that you're unable to provide adequate care for your son. In that case, he would be placed in foster care until you can demonstrate that you're capable of taking care of him." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're going to take my baby away?" "Nobody wants to do that," she said quickly. "But we have to prioritize the child's welfare. However, I'm going to give you some options. There are programs for single Omega parents, temporary housing assistance, job training. If you're willing to work with us, we can help you get back on your feet." I grabbed onto that hope, like a drowning person grabbing a life raft. "I'll do anything," I said desperately. "I'll work with any program you have. Just please don't take my son away from me. She handed me a stack of pamphlets. Start by applying for these services. I'll check back with you in a few days. Over the next week, while my son was still in the NICU, filled out more forms than I had ever seen in my life. Applications for housing assistance, food stamps, Medicaid, temporary cash assistance. Every single one required documentation I didn't have because I had left everything behind when Adrian threw me out. I had no proof of my previous address, no tax returns because Adrian had claimed me as no bank statements because I had never had my own account. I was trying to prove I existed in a system that had no record of me. Finally, one of the social workers helped me get a copy of my birth certificate, and from there, I was able to start rebuilding my paper trail. The day they released my son from the NICU, I was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. I held him in my arms in the hospital parking lot, staring at the busy street beyond, and having no idea where to go. That's when I met Margaret. She was an elderly Omega who ran a boarding house on the edge of the city, the kind of place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask too many questions. The social worker had given me her information as a last resort option. The boarding house was old and shabby with crooked stairs and wallpaper that was peeling in the corners. But when Margaret opened the door and saw me standing there with a newborn baby and a desperate expression, her face softened. "You must be Kai," she said. "The social worker called about you. Come in, dear." The room she showed me was tiny, barely big enough for a single bed and a dresser, with a shared bathroom down the hall. But it was clean and it was mine, and that was more than I had dared to hope for. "It's $300 a week," Margaret said.
I know that's steep, but it includes utilities, and you can use the kitchen.
I did the math in my head. I had about $800 left from my savings. That would cover less than 3 weeks. "I'll take it," I said anyway. Margaret looked at the baby in my arms, and her expression grew even softer. "I'll give you the first week free," she said quietly. "Consider it a baby gift, but after that you need to pay on time, or I'll have to ask you to leave. I can't afford to run a charity." I almost cried from gratitude. Thank you. Thank you so much." That night, I lay in bed with my son sleeping in a dresser drawer that I had lined with blankets because I couldn't afford a crib. I stared at the cracked ceiling and wondered how I was going to survive. The next morning, I started looking for work. But finding a job while caring for a newborn was nearly impossible. Daycare was expensive, more than I could ever afford, and I had no one to watch the baby while I worked. I tried bringing him with me to job interviews, but the moment potential employers saw me walk in with an infant, their expressions changed. "Too much liability," they would say. Or, "We're looking for someone who can commit full time." After 2 weeks of rejection, I was down to my last $100. I sat in my tiny room, holding my crying son, and feeling completely hopeless. That's when I saw the advertisement. Surrogates needed. Generous compensation. Confidential arrangements. It was from a high-end agency that connected wealthy couples with Omegas willing to carry their children. The payment was substantial, enough to support me and my son for years if I was careful, but it meant being pregnant again, giving my body over to creating a child I would never keep. The idea made me feel sick. But what choice did I have? I called the number the next day. The agency was located in the wealthy part of the city, in a sleek, modern building that made me painfully aware of my thrift store clothes and worn-out shoes. The receptionist looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain, but directed me to an office on the 3rd floor. The woman who interviewed me was named Dr. Simmons. She was professional and efficient, explaining the process with clinical detachment. "We perform extensive health screenings on all our surrogates," she said. "You'll need to undergo medical tests, psychological evaluations, and background checks. If you're approved, we'll match you with intended parents and begin the medical procedures. How much does it pay? I asked quietly. Our standard compensation is $200,000, paid in installments throughout the pregnancy. $200,000. It was more money than I had ever imagined having. It could change everything for me and my son. However, Dr. Simmons continued, should mention that we typically prefer surrogates who don't have children of their own. It can create complications. My heart sank. I have a 3-week-old son. Her expression cooled immediately. I see. In that case, I'm not sure we can work with you. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Please, I said, hating how desperate I sounded. I'm a good candidate otherwise. I'm young, I'm healthy. I just had a successful pregnancy. I need this. Dr. Simmons studied me for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. I'll submit your application, but I can't make any promises. We have very high standards. I left the agency feeling defeated. But 3 days later, they called me back. We have a client who's interested in meeting you, the receptionist said. Can you come in tomorrow at 2? I showed up 15 minutes early, my son bundled against my chest in a baby carrier because I had no one to leave him with. The receptionist looked annoyed, but didn't say anything. Dr. Simmons met me in the lobby and led me to a private conference room. The client is very particular, she warned me. Answer their questions, honestly, and don't volunteer unnecessary information. Then she opened the door, and my entire world stopped. Sitting at the conference table, looking at me with an expression of absolute shock, was Adrian Castellano, and sitting beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, was Vanessa. For a moment, nobody moved. We just stared at each other in frozen horror. Then, Vanessa's eyes dropped to the baby carrier on my chest, and her face twisted with rage. What the hell is this? She demanded, looking at Dr. Simmons. You brought us a surrogate with a baby? But Adrian wasn't looking at Vanessa. He was staring at my son with an expression I couldn't read. How old is he? He asked quietly. My voice came out as barely a whisper. 3 weeks. I watched the realization dawn on his face as he did the math. His eyes widened slightly. And when he looked back at me, there was something in his gaze that might have been regret. He's mine, isn't he? The conference felt like all the air had been sucked out of it. Vanessa's face had gone completely pale and then flushed dark red with fury. Dr. Simmons looked between us with growing alarm, clearly realizing this situation was far more complicated than she had anticipated. I couldn't speak. My arms tightened protectively around my son, who was sleeping peacefully against my chest, completely unaware that his father was sitting 3 feet away. Adrian stood up slowly from his chair, his movements careful like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any second. Kai, he said, and hearing him say my name after all these months made something inside me crack. Is he mine? Vanessa shot to her feet. Adrian, don't be ridiculous. She's obviously lying to get money from you. She didn't even know I would be here, Adrian said without taking his eyes off me. Dr. Simmons set up this meeting. This is just a coincidence. He took a step closer. Kai, please, is that my son? I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him no, that my son had nothing to do with him, that he had given up any right to ask me questions when he threw us away like garbage. But when I opened my mouth, truth came out anyway. Yes, I whispered. He's yours. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian's hand came up to his mouth, and he just stared at the baby, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that almost looked like wonder. I don't believe this, Vanessa hissed. She turned to me with pure venom in her eyes. You probably got pregnant on purpose, trying to trap him. When that didn't work, you show up here looking for a paycheck. Vanessa, that's enough. Adrian said sharply. Enough, she repeated incredulously. Adrian, this Omega is clearly running some kind of scam. She probably slept with half the city. That baby could be anyone's. He has my eyes, Adrian said quietly, still staring at my son, and he was born 3 weeks ago. The timeline matches exactly. Vanessa looked like she wanted to explode, but Dr. Simmons quickly intervened. Perhaps we should all take a moment to calm down, she said in her most professional voice. This is clearly a very complicated situation, and we should discuss it rationally. There's nothing to discuss, I said. Finding my voice again, I looked at Adrian for the first time since that terrible night in the penthouse. You made it very clear that you wanted nothing to do with this baby. That hasn't changed, just because you're seeing him now. Kai, I didn't know you were actually going to keep it, Adrian said, and the words sounded so ridiculous that I actually laughed. What did you think I was going to do with the check you offered me? I asked bitterly. Oh, right, I tore it up because I'm not for sale. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You turned down $50,000. Now I know you're lying. No Omega, from your background, would turn down that kind of money. You don't know anything about me, I said coldly. Adrian, you know what? Vanessa said, turning to her husband. This is actually perfect. If that baby really is yours, then we should take custody of him immediately. He deserves to grow up in a proper home with proper parents, not in whatever slum she's been living in. My blood ran cold. You're not taking my son. Why not? Vanessa challenged. What exactly can you offer him? Look at yourself. You're clearly destitute. You came here to sell your body as a surrogate because you're desperate for money. That's not a fit environment for a child, especially not a Castellano heir. She smiled cruelly. Any court would agree that the baby belongs with us. Adrian hadn't said anything yet, and his silence was somehow worse than Vanessa's attacks. I looked at him, searching for any sign of the man I had once loved, the man who had held me gently and promised me that status. Didn't matter. Is that what you want? I asked him. Directly. You want to take my son away from me? He looked conflicted, his jaw working as he struggled with something internal. Kai, be reasonable. Vanessa has a point. I can give him everything. The best schools, the best health care, opportunities you could never provide. Wouldn't you want that for him? What I want is to be his parent, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I don't care about expensive schools or trust funds. I care about loving him and protecting him and being there for him every single day. That's what a parent does. Love doesn't pay for food or diapers or medical bills, Vanessa interjected. You're being selfish, keeping him in poverty just because you're too proud to admit you can't take care of him. Before I could respond, my son started crying. It was feeding time, and he was letting me know loudly. I turned away from them and carefully started to prepare a bottle with the formula I kept in my bag, my hands shaking. We can give him everything, Adrian said again, his voice softer now. Kai, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help. You want to help? I said without turning around. Then leave us alone. Vanessa made a disgusted sound. Adrian, we're not leaving without that baby. Call your lawyer. We'll file for emergency custody today. That got my attention. I spun around, holding my crying son against my chest. You can't do that. Watch us, Vanessa said with a satisfied smile. Adrian has money, power, and legal resources you couldn't even dream of. By tomorrow, that baby will be legally ours. Dr. Simmons finally stepped in, looking deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Castellano, Mrs. Castellano, I really think we should all take some time to think about this situation before making any rash decisions. Perhaps mediation would be appropriate. The only thing that needs to happen is a paternity test, Vanessa said firmly. Once that proves the baby is Adrian's, we'll proceed with custody proceedings. Adrian was still staring at my son's who had quieted down now that I was feeding him. "Can I hold him?" he asked suddenly. Everything in me screamed no, but I found myself hesitating. This was his father, regardless of how I felt about him. Didn't he have some right to meet his own son? Slowly, carefully, I walked over and transferred the baby into Adrian's arms, showing him how to support the head. Adrian looked down at our son with an expression of absolute awe. His finger gently touched the baby's tiny hand, and when those small fingers wrapped around Adrian's, I saw his eyes get shiny with unshed tears. "What's his name?" he asked softly. I hadn't named him yet. I had been so focused on survival that I hadn't even thought about it. "He doesn't have one," I admitted. "We should call him Alexander," Vanessa said immediately, after Adrian's grandfather. "His name is Ethan," I said, the name coming to me suddenly. "Ethan James." Adrian looked up at me. "James was your father's name, wasn't it?" I was surprised he remembered. I had only mentioned my parents once in passing years ago. "Yes," I said quietly. "Ethan James," Adrian repeated, looking back down at the baby. "It's perfect." Vanessa made an irritated sound, but Adrian ignored her. For several minutes, he just held Ethan, gently rocking him, and I saw something in his expression that I had never seen before. Genuine tenderness. Finally he carefully handed Ethan back to me. "Kai," he said, "I'm sorry for everything. For how I treated you, for throwing you out, for not believing you about the pregnancy. I was wrong." The apology caught me off guard. Vanessa certainly looked shocked. "Adrian, what are you doing?" she demanded. "I made a mistake," he said, still looking at me. "A terrible mistake, and I want to fix it." "You can't fix this," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "You married someone else. You built a whole life that doesn't include me. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay." "I know," he said, "but I want to be part of Ethan's life. Please, let me help support him. I'll set up a trust fund, pay for his expenses, make sure he has everything he needs." "In exchange for what?" I asked suspiciously. "Nothing," Adrian said. "Nose attached, you keep full custody. I just want to be his father." Vanessa exploded. "Absolutely not. Adrian, if you think I'm going to stand by while you funnel money to your ex and his illegitimate child, you're insane. I will divorce you and take half of everything you own." "Then divorce me," Adrian said calmly. Vanessa's mouth fell open in shock. He turned back to me. "Kai, please. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm asking anyway. Let me do this one thing right." I looked down at Ethan, sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding him. Part of me wanted to refuse out of pure spite, to make Adrian suffer the way he had made me suffer. But I thought about Margaret's boarding house, about my dwindling savings, about the constant fear of not being able to provide for my son. And I thought about what was best for Ethan. "Okay," I said finally, "but I have conditions." Adrian nodded immediately. "Anything. First, I keep full custody. You can visit Ethan, but he lives with me. Second, any financial support goes through a lawyer. I don't want to have any direct contact with you. Third, you stay away from me. You can be Ethan's father, but you're not part of my life anymore." Each condition clearly hurt him, but he agreed to all of them without argument. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the paperwork," he said. "And Kai, thank you." Vanessa stormed out of the conference room without another word. Dr. Simmons looked relieved that the crisis had been averted, and I held my son and tried to process what had just happened. 3 days later, Adrian's lawyer contacted me with the proposed agreement. It was beyond generous. A trust fund for Ethan worth $2 million. Monthly support payments of $10,000. Complete coverage of all medical and educational expenses. And a clause that gave me full legal custody, with Adrian having scheduled visitation rights. I signed the papers with shaking hands, still half convinced this was some kind of trap. But the money started appearing in a new bank account the lawyer had set up for me. And for the first time since Ethan was born, I could breathe. I moved out of Margaret's boarding house and into a modest but clean apartment in a safe neighborhood. I bought a real crib for Ethan, stocked the fridge with actual food, and cried with relief every night for a week. Adrian started visiting every Saturday afternoon. At first, the meetings were awkward and painful. We barely spoke to each other, communicating only about Ethan's feeding schedule or sleep patterns. But slowly, week by week, some of the tension began to ease. I watched him learn to change diapers, to burp Ethan properly, to soothe him when he cried. And despite everything, despite all the hurt and betrayal, I couldn't deny that Adrian was trying to be a good father. 6 months passed in a strange new routine. Every Saturday, at 2 o'clock, Adrian would arrive at my apartment to spend time with Ethan. He was always punctual, always bringing some new toy or outfit that Ethan was still too young to appreciate. And every Saturday, I would retreat to my bedroom while they bonded in the living room, trying to ignore the complicated mess of emotions churning inside me. Ethan was growing fast. He had started smiling, reaching for objects, making those adorable baby sounds that melted my heart every single time. And I couldn't deny that he lit up whenever he saw Adrian. There was some instinctive recognition there, some bond that had nothing to do with my feelings about his father. I had enrolled in online classes, working toward the university degree I had abandoned years ago. With the financial support Adrian provided, I could actually focus on building a future instead of just surviving day to day. It felt strange to have stability after so long without it. One Saturday, Adrian arrived looking different. Tired, maybe, or troubled. He held Ethan gently as always, but I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked, before I could stop myself. We usually didn't talk about personal things. He looked up at me, surprised that I had asked. "Vanessa and I are getting divorced," he said quietly. "It should be finalized next month." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction. She had been cruel and dismissive, had tried to take my son away, but another part of me felt nothing at all, just a distant recognition of information that didn't really concern me anymore. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't be, it was a disaster from the start. The only reason we got married was family pressure and business strategy. There was never any real connection between us." He looked down at Ethan, who was grabbing at his finger with determination. "Not like what I had with you." My chest tightened. "Adrian, don't." "I know," he said quickly. "I know I don't have the right to say things like that anymore. I just wanted you to know that I think about those 2 years we had together, and I regret every single decision I made that destroyed it." I forced myself to stay calm, to not let his words affect me. "What's done is done. We can't change the past. What about the future?" he asked, looking at me with those dark eyes that had once made me feel like the most important person in the world. "Kai, I know I hurt you. I know I was cruel and selfish and stupid, but I've spent the last 6 months watching you be an incredible father to our son. And I've realized that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." I stood up abruptly. "I think you should leave. Kai, please, just listen." "No," I said firmly, "you don't get to do this. You don't get to show up here and tell me you made a mistake and expect me to just forgive you. You threw me away, Adrian. You chose status and business deals over the person who loved you. And now that your perfect society marriage is falling apart, you think you can just come back?" He stood too, still carefully holding Ethan. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you only want me now because I'm convenient again." "That's not fair." Adrian said, his voice rising slightly. Ethan started fussing, and he immediately lowered his voice, gently bouncing to soothe him. I've been trying to show you that I've changed. I've respected all your boundaries. I've supported you financially. I've been here every single week for Ethan. Being a father doesn't mean I owe you anything, I said. I know that, Adrian said desperately. I'm not asking you to owe me. I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to prove that I can be better than I was. Before I could respond, there was a sharp knock on my apartment door. I frowned, not expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found a well-dressed woman in her 60s standing there with an expression of cold disapproval. Can I help you? I asked. You must be Kai, she said, in a tone that made my name sound like an insult. I'm Adrian Castellano, Adrian's mother. My stomach dropped. I had never met Adrian's parents. During our relationship, he had always made excuses for why he couldn't introduce me to them yet. Now I understood why. Mrs. Castellano, I said carefully, what are you doing here? I'm here to meet my grandson, she said, pushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. She stopped short when she saw Adrian standing there with Ethan. Adrian, I thought I might find you here. Mother, Adrian said, his voice tight. You can't just show up at Kai's apartment. I can go wherever I please. Catherine replied. Her sharp eyes moved to Ethan and something in her expression shifted. She walked closer, examining the baby with the same scrutiny someone might use to evaluate a piece of art. He has the Castellano features, she said finally. There's no denying he's one of ours. Ethan is not a possession, I said, moving protectively closer to Adrian and the baby. Catherine's eyes snapped to me. I'm aware of that. I'm also aware that you've been receiving substantial financial support from my son. $10,000 a month, plus a $2 million trust fund. Very generous for someone with no legal claim to the Castellano fortune. Ethan is Adrian's son, I said. He has every legal claim, does he? Catherine asked. Because I've reviewed the paperwork, and while my son has acknowledged paternity, there's been no formal legitimization. In the eyes of our family, this child is illegitimate. Mother, that's enough, Adrian said dangerously. Is it? She challenged. You have responsibilities. Family has invested too much in your future to have it derailed by some unfortunate attachment to a former fling. Kai isn't a fling, Adrian said. He's the father of my child. Yes, I can see that, Catherine said dryly. She turned back to me. Kai, I'm going to make you an offer, $5 million, deposited into an account of your choosing, in exchange for you signing away all parental rights to Ethan. The room went completely silent. You're trying to buy my son, I said, disbelief and rage warring inside me. I'm offering you financial security, Catherine corrected. $5 million is more money than someone of your background could earn in several lifetimes. You could live comfortably, finish your education, build whatever life you want, and Ethan would be raised as a proper Castellano with every advantage our family can provide. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. I'm not finished, Catherine said calmly. If you refuse this very generous offer, I will make your life extremely difficult. I have lawyers who can tie you up in custody battles for years. I have private investigators who can dig up every mistake you've ever made. I have the resources to paint you as an unfit parent and take that child away from you. You can't do that, I said, but my voice wavered with fear because I knew she probably could. Adrian, tell her she can't do that. But Adrian was staring at his mother with absolute fury. You need to leave right now, he said in a voice I had never heard from him before. Actually, I need to stay and make sure you understand what's at stake here, Catherine replied. This Omega is clearly using the baby to manipulate you. Can't you see that? He turned down your initial offer, waited until you saw the child, and now he has you paying him a small fortune every month. It's a very effective strategy. Kai didn't know I would be at that agency, Adrian said through clenched teeth. It was a coincidence. There are no coincidences when this much money is involved, Catherine said. She looked at me again. My offer stands for 24 hours. After that, I proceed with legal action. Then she turned and walked out of my apartment, leaving devastation in her wake. The moment the door closed, I sank onto the couch, my whole body trembling. She can't actually take Ethan away. Can she? I asked, desperately. Adrian sat beside me, still holding our son. I won't let that happen. I promise you, Kai. I will not let my mother take Ethan. But she said she has lawyers, investigators. Adrian, I can't fight your family. I don't have the resources. You have me, Adrian said firmly, and I'm not going to let her do this. Over the next few days, Adrian hired a team of lawyers to protect my parental rights. But Adrian Castellano was true to her word. Within a week, I was served with papers for a custody evaluation. She was claiming I was an unfit parent, citing my previous homelessness, my lack of stable employment history, and my age. The evaluation process was humiliating. A court-appointed social worker came to my apartment, asking invasive questions about my past, my finances, my mental health. She interviewed people from the homeless shelter, my former manager at the coffee shop, even Margaret from the... I felt like my entire life was being dissected and judged. Adrian was furious but helpless. As much as he wanted to protect me, he couldn't interfere with a court-ordered process. All he could do was make sure I had the best legal representation possible. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I barely slept the night before, terrified of what might happen. Adrian met me at the courthouse for the first time since that day in the penthouse. He held my hand. Whatever happens, he said quietly, we face it together. The hearing itself was brutal. Catherine's lawyers painted me as a struggling Omega who had trapped their client with a pregnancy, then used the child to extort money. They brought up my homelessness, my previous rejection of Adrian's financial offer, and twisted it all into a narrative of calculated manipulation. My lawyer fought back, presenting evidence of my stable housing, my enrollment in classes, my consistent care for Ethan. Character witnesses testified about what a devoted parent I was. But I could see the judge's skeptical expression, and my hope started to crumble. Then Adrian did something I never expected. He stood up in the middle of the proceedings and asked to address the court directly. The judge looked surprised but allowed it. Your Honor, Adrian said, his voice clear and steady. I need to make something absolutely clear. Kai did not trap me. Kai did not manipulate me. Every terrible thing that happened between us was entirely my fault. He took a breath. When Kai told me about the pregnancy, I rejected him. I offered him money to end the pregnancy. When he refused, I threw him out of my home with nothing. I married someone else while he was homeless and pregnant with my child. And when I finally saw my son for the first time, Kai asked for nothing. He was prepared to raise Ethan alone, because I had hurt him so badly that he wanted nothing to do with me. The courtroom was completely silent. My mother is trying to paint Kai as someone who manipulates people for money, Adrian continued. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Kai has more integrity than anyone I've ever met. He turned down $50,000 because he refused to end his pregnancy. He turned down my initial offers of support because he didn't trust my motives. Every single dollar I've given him has been because I begged him to accept it, not because he asked for it. He turned to look at me, and his eyes were bright with emotion. Kai is an incredible father. He's devoted, patient, loving, and completely selfless. Ethan is thriving because of him, and if this Court takes my son away from the person who has sacrificed everything to care for him. It will be the greatest injustice I've ever witnessed. When he sat back down, I realized I was crying. Catherine's lawyer tried to discredit Adrian's testimony, suggesting he was emotionally compromised and not thinking clearly. But the damage was done. The judge had heard the truth directly from Adrian's mouth. After a brief recess, the judge returned with her decision. "I have reviewed all the evidence presented in this case," she said, "and I find no credible reason to remove the child from Kai's custody. Petitioner's claims of unfitness are not supported by the facts. Kai has demonstrated consistent, appropriate care for the child, has stable housing, and is actively working to improve his circumstances." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I thought I might collapse. "However," the judge continued, "I am ordering a formal custody arrangement to be established. Adrian Castellano has acknowledged paternity and has a right to regular visitation. I'm mandating mediation to establish a fair schedule that serves the best interests of the child." Catherine looked livid, but there was nothing she could do. The judge's ruling was final. Outside the courthouse, Adrian pulled me into a tight hug. "It's over," he whispered. "She can't hurt you anymore." But I pulled away, needing some distance to process everything. "Thank you for what you said in there. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Adrian said. "It was the truth." The months following the custody hearing brought unexpected changes. Adrian's visitation schedule was formalized to 3 days a week, and he never missed a single visit. I watched him become more confident as a father, learning Ethan's cries and quirks, developing his own soothing techniques, and silly games that made our son giggle. Catherine Castellano made one more attempt to interfere, showing up at my apartment with another offer. This time it was $10 million. I didn't even let her finish speaking before closing the door in her face. After that, she seemed to finally accept that I wasn't going away. Adrian's divorce from Vanessa was finalized 4 months after the custody hearing. He showed up at my apartment at that evening, looking exhausted but relieved. "It's done," he said simply. I nodded, not sure what else to say. We had developed a careful friendship over the past months, built entirely around our son, but we never discussed our past relationship or what might happen in the future. That night was different though. After putting Ethan to bed, Adrian lingered in the living room instead of leaving immediately as he usually did. "Kai," he said carefully, "can we talk? Really talk?" I sat down on the couch, maintaining some distance between us. "About what?" "About us," he said. "About everything I destroyed and everything I want to rebuild." I had known this conversation was coming eventually, but I still wasn't prepared for it. "Adrian, I don't know if there's an us to rebuild. Too much has happened." "I know," he said, "and I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But I need you to understand something. These past months, watching you with Ethan, getting to know you again, I've realized that what I felt for you before was real. And it's still real. My heart was beating too fast. You can't just decide you want me back now, that it's convenient. It's not about convenience." Adrian said urgently, "Kai, leaving you was the worst mistake of my life. Not just because of Ethan, but because I genuinely loved you, and I was too stupid and scared to fight for that love when it mattered. You married someone else," I said, the old hurt rising up. "You chose her over me." "I chose wrong," Adrian said. "I chose what my family expected, what society expected, what I thought I was supposed to want. I was miserable every single day of that marriage because she wasn't you." Tears were burning behind my eyes. "That doesn't change what you did. You hurt me so badly, Adrian. You made me feel worthless." "I know," he whispered, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that if you'll let me." He moved closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm not even asking you to take me back. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I've changed, that I can be the partner you deserved from the beginning. I wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to protect myself from the possibility of being hurt again. But I looked at this man who had stood up to his entire family for me, who had acknowledged his mistakes publicly, who had become a devoted father to our son, and I saw something genuine in his eyes. If we tried this again, I said slowly, it would have to be completely different. No more hiding me from your family. No more choosing your reputation over our relationship. I won't be your secret or your shame ever again. I would never ask you to be, Adrian said. Kai, if you give me another chance, I want to do this right. I want to introduce you properly to everyone who matters. I want to take you to family events and business dinners. I want the whole world to know that you're mine and I'm yours. The sincerity in his voice made something in my chest crack open. I'm scared, I admitted. What if you change your mind again? What if the pressure from your family becomes too much? Then I'll choose you, Adrian said without hesitation. Every single time, I'll choose you. I'll walk away from the company, from the family fortune, from all of it, if that's what it takes. Because none of it means anything without you and Ethan. He reached out and gently took my hand. I love you. Kai, I never stopped loving you, even when I was too much of a coward to admit it. The words I had desperately wanted to hear 2 years ago now hung in the air between us. I looked at our joined hands, this man who had broken my heart and was now offering it back, and I made a choice. Okay, I whispered. Okay? Adrian repeated, hope flooding his expression. We can try again, I said, slowly. I'm not ready to just pick up where we left off, but we can try to build something new. The smile that spread across Adrian's face was brilliant. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Thank you. I promise I won't waste this chance. True to his word, Adrian took things slowly. Our relationship rebuilt itself gradually over the next several months. He took me on proper dates, insisted on picking me up and bringing me home, treated me like I was precious. He introduced me to his business partners and made it clear that I was important to him. When he invited me to a family dinner, I almost refused. The thought of facing Adrian Castellano across a dinner table made my stomach turn. But Adrian squeezed my hand and promised he would be right beside me the entire time. The dinner was at the Castellano family estate, a massive mansion that made Adrian's old penthouse look modest by comparison. Catherine greeted us at the door with an expression of cold politeness. Adrian's father, Robert, was more welcoming, though clearly cautious. The meal itself was tense. Catherine made several pointed comments about my background and education, clearly trying to make me feel inferior. But every time she started one of her subtle attacks, Adrian would firmly redirect the conversation or openly call out her rudeness. Mother, he said at one point, if you can't speak respectfully to Kai, then we'll leave right now and you won't see your grandson again. The threat worked. Catherine's lips thinned into a disapproving line, but she stopped the direct attacks. After dinner, Robert pulled Adrian aside for a private conversation. I stood awkwardly in the grand foyer, wondering if I should just wait in the car when Catherine approached me. You're persistent, I'll give you that, she said coldly. I'm not trying to be anything, I replied. I'm just trying to build a life with Adrian and raise our son. Son could have anyone. Catherine continued. Wealthy Omegas from prestigious families, people who understand our world and our responsibilities. Why do you think you're worthy of him? The question stung, hitting all my old insecurities. But I thought about everything I had survived, everything I had endured, and I found my answer. I don't think I'm worthy of him. I said honestly. But I think we're worthy of each other. Adrian isn't perfect, and neither am I. But we love each other, and we're both trying to be better. That's what matters. Catherine studied me for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. I don't like you. I probably never will. You represent everything I didn't want for my son's future. She paused. But I can see that he's happy with you. Genuinely happy in a way he never was with Vanessa. And I suppose a mother should want her child to be happy, even if it's not the happiness she planned for him. It wasn't exactly a warm acceptance, but it was something. When Adrian emerged from his conversation with his father, he immediately came to my side. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking between me and his mother. "We were just talking," I said. Adrian looked suspicious but didn't press. We said our goodbyes and left, and in the car Adrian reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You handled my mother's rudeness with so much grace. I know that couldn't have been easy." "Your father seemed nice, though," I offered. Adrian smiled. "He told me he approves of you. He said anyone who can stand up to my mother and refuse to be intimidated has the strength to be part of this family." As the months continued to pass, our relationship deepened. Adrian started staying over at my apartment some nights, helping with Ethan's night feedings, and slowly we rebuilt the intimacy we had lost. But it was different now, more mature, built on honest communication, instead of just passion. One evening, about a year after we had started dating again, Adrian showed up at my apartment, with an unusual expression on his face. He seemed nervous, which was rare for him. "I need to show you something," he said. He drove us to a beautiful neighborhood I had never been to before, full of tree-lined streets and elegant houses. When he pulled into the driveway of a particular house, I looked at him in confusion. "Adrian, whose house is this?" "Potentially ours," he said, "if you like it." He led me inside and I gasped. The house was perfect. Not ostentatiously large, like his family's estate, but spacious and warm, with big windows that let in natural light, a modern kitchen, and a backyard with room for Ethan to play. "There are 4 bedrooms upstairs," Adrian explained as we walked through. "One for us, one for Ethan, one that could be a guest room, and one that could be an office or nursery, if we decide to expand our family someday." My heart was pounding. "Adrian, this is too much." "It's not," he insisted. "Kai, I don't want to keep living in separate apartments, coordinating visitation schedules like we're strangers. I want us to be a real family. I want to wake up next to you every morning and put Ethan to bed together every night." He took both my hands in his. "Move in with me. Not into some penthouse that represents my old life, but into a home we choose together. A place that's ours." I looked around the beautiful house, imagining our life here. Ethan taking his first steps in the living room, family dinners in the kitchen, growing old together in this space. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, I'll move in with you." Adrian pulled me into his arms and kissed me, and it felt like coming home. We moved into the house 2 months later. It took some adjustment, learning to live together again after everything that had happened. But we worked through it. Adrian was patient when I had moments of insecurity, and I tried to trust him when old fears surfaced. Ethan thrived in his new home. He was walking now, getting into everything, and absolutely adored, having both his parents around all the time. Watching Adrian chase our giggling son around the living room, I felt a contentment I had never imagined possible during those dark days in the shelter. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find Adrian's side of the bed empty. I could hear sounds from downstairs and smell coffee brewing. When I made my way to the kitchen, I found Adrian making breakfast, with Ethan helping by banging a wooden spoon against a pot. "Good morning," Adrian said, leaning over to kiss me. "We're making pancakes." "Well, I'm making pancakes." Ethan is making noise. I laughed and scooped up our son, who immediately grabbed my hair with his sticky fingers. This was my life now. Messy, chaotic, beautiful. After breakfast, Adrian seemed nervous again. He kept fidgeting with his coffee cup and glancing at me. "What's wrong?" I finally asked. "Nothing's wrong," he said. "I just have something I want to ask you." He stood up and, to my complete shock, got down on one knee right there in our kitchen. My hand flew to my mouth as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Kai," he said, his voice thick with emotion. 2 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. By letting you go, I was given a second chance that I absolutely didn't deserve. And you've spent the past year and a half showing me what real love looks like. You're an incredible father, an amazing partner, and the strongest person I've ever known. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "I don't want to just live with you. I want to marry you. I want to make this official and permanent."
I want the whole world to know that you're my husband and I'm yours.
Tears were already streaming down my face. Ethan was trying to grab the shiny ring, completely oblivious to the significance of the moment. "Kai, will you marry me?" Adrian asked. I didn't even have to think about it. "Yes," I said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Adrian stood and slipped the ring onto my finger, then kissed me deeply while Ethan squealed happily between us. We got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at our house, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Former manager from the coffee shop was there, and Margaret from the boarding house. Adrian's father attended, and even Catherine showed up, though she sat in the back and left quickly after the ceremony. But none of that mattered. Because when I stood in front of Adrian and said my vows, promising to love him through everything life might bring, I meant every word. And when he promised the same to me, I finally, truly believed him. 5 years have passed since that day. Ethan is in kindergarten now, an energetic 5-year-old who keeps us constantly busy. We ended up using that 4th bedroom after all, when I gave birth to our daughter, Maya, 2 years ago. Adrian is still running his companies, but he's transformed the corporate culture, implementing policies that support Omega employees and low-income families. He says I inspired him to use his privilege for something meaningful. I finished my degree and now work part-time as a social worker, helping other Omegas who find themselves in situations like I once was. It's hard work but incredibly rewarding. Sometimes I still think about those dark days when I was scrubbing floors while pregnant, wondering how I would survive. I think about the homeless shelter and the fear and the overwhelming loneliness. And then I look at my life now, at my husband who loves me, at my children who are healthy and happy, at the home we've built together. And I'm amazed by how much can change. Adrian still apologizes sometimes for what he did. I tell him we don't need to keep revisiting the past, that what matters is who we are now and who we're becoming together. But I understand why he does it. Some mistakes are so profound that they reshape you completely. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Adrian and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset. He had his arm around me and I was leaning against his shoulder, comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes from years of partnership. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Giving me a second chance. You could have kept me at arm's length forever. Just co-parenting Ethan without letting me back into your heart. Do you ever wish you had?" I thought about it honestly. Sometimes I'm still scared, I admitted. Sometimes I have moments where I remember how much it hurt when you left, and I'm terrified it could happen again. I felt him tense slightly, but then I remember that fear isn't a good enough reason to give up on love. I continued, "You made a terrible mistake, but you've spent years proving that you learned from it. You've shown me through your actions. not just your words that you're committed to us. So no, I don't regret giving you a second chance. I'm grateful I was brave enough to try again. Adrian pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head. I will never stop trying to be worthy of that bravery, he murmured. We sat there as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, and I thought about how strange and unpredictable life could be, how the worst moments could somehow lead to the best ones, how broken things could be rebuilt into something even stronger than before. My name is Kai. I'm 29 years old, married to the love of my life, father to 2 incredible children, and survivor of more hardship than I ever imagined I could endure. If someone had told me 5 years ago, when I was at my lowest point, that this is where I would end up, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I am, and I've never been happier. Sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that go smoothly from beginning to end. Sometimes they're the ones that fall apart completely and then get painstakingly rebuilt, piece by piece, into something more beautiful and real than they ever were before. This is my story, and I'm so grateful for every painful, difficult, wonderful moment that led me here.